Hi, my name is Marcia Cuccaro, and I'm a member of the Nevada Women's History Project. Today is Tuesday, December 9th, and we're in Reno, Nevada, interviewing Karen Abowd. This interview is generously funded by the Estelle J. Kelsey Foundation. Share some background with us, like where you were born and where you went to school, where you grew up.
Sure. I was born in Sonora, California, and then our family moved to San Jose, California, and that's where I grew up back in the days where you walk through orchards to get to school.
Did you have siblings?
Yes, I had a sister and a brother, and went to St. Christopher's Elementary School and Presentation High School, one of the first 4 graduating classes because it was a brand new school at the time. And then went on to Santa Clara University. And I actually, in my senior year, met my husband Charlie. It was a blind date that our sisters set up. And the rest is history with regards to that, because we've been together for 55 years. So.
Oh my goodness.
Early years living in San Jose, of course, influences that sort of thing. My dad was a civil engineer, and my mom was a bookkeeper. And my dad loved to garden, and I think that's where I got my passion. And civil engineering, he would always have plans which intrigued me, and, later on in my career, as I'll talk about, I became an interior designer. But my grandmothers used to come and visit all the time, and they were a huge influence in my life. Very engaged with us. One of my grandmothers lived in Eureka, California, and she used to always come on the bus and bring identical matching dresses for my sister and I and take us to Woolworths and to the movies, and special memory. And my grandma Jeanette lived behind the BV winery in a little house, hated those winemakers. They were going to ruin the valley, And she would play bridge and canasta until she was 96 years old, driving her red Rambler. So both of them were an inspiration to me. And then because I met my husband early on, he too was kind of a huge inspiration in terms of my life, because back in those days, it was I had a very sheltered, controlled environment, and Charlie opened my eyes to the world and taught me to question, and from there we launched.
So you got married when you were how old?
I got married when I was just 21, barely, barely squeaked through. And I was going to Santa Clara University at the time, and I had, at that time, thought physical therapy was going to be my major. But we had gotten married, and Santa Clara didn't offer that, and so I had to matriculate at San Jose State University and De Anza College in order to at least get a physical therapy assistance degree. So I did get that degree and worked in the oncology unit at San Jose Hospital and at Good Samaritan Hospital. And then Charlie and I moved up to the Santa Cruz Mountains and ultimately to Santa Cruz, and had our first daughter there, Raquel. And then we had our second child, Paul, and Paul passed away due to SIDS.
Oh, wow.
And so at that point, we needed a break. We needed to move away. Charlie was working in construction at that point in time, and his uncle lived in Seattle. And he had a construction company, and so we moved up there, and I worked in physical therapy at Harborview Hospital in trauma care. So I got to see things from all different vantage points in that field, but my husband felt like I was bringing too much of that home because I worked in the burn unit and all kinds of things, so you see a lot. So I went to waiting tables at a restaurant there, and I even had, when our next son, Eric, was born, I even had an adult paper route in University of Washington District because I could take him with me, nurse him, and deliver papers at people's door and be home to get Raquel off to school in the morning, that kind of a thing. So, kind of that diverse background. And then, and Charlie was working construction, but there were more wildcat strikes than they were working. And of course, you paid the union dues and all the rest of that. And he was advising, doing construction work, but advising down by Pike Place Market, a restaurant there. And his mom, Adele, said at that point they had just opened Adele's in Carson City. She said, well, if you're doing that there, then why don't you come here? So we did, and in 1980, we moved to Nevada.
Because Adele's opened when? Was
79, 78, 79, somewhere in there. Yeah. So, yeah.
And so from there, what did you do?
Well, from that point, I was, waiting tables because physical therapy assistants weren't even licensed in Nevada, and they were paying $5 an hour. And we had 2 kids then, and eventually a third, Jeremiah. And so, though I was waiting tables and making great money at Adele's, I knew that I had to move beyond that because we were ultimately going to have 3 kids going to college, and I needed to make that happen.
So if you were working at Adele's as a waitress, I mean, that was always really impressive because they had to rattle off this huge, long menu.
It really helped you memorize.
So I probably saw you there.
You probably did. I probably waited on you.
Yes, you probably did.
Likely. And, fortunately, my father-in-law, I baked a lot, too. And so he had me baking desserts. And at one point, Charlie and I sat down and I said, I've got to move on and do something else that financially is more feasible for our family. And interior design, my dad's days as a civil engineer, me being intrigued with plans, had always intrigued me. And so I put myself through school at UNR and finished my degree because I had 3 years at Santa Clara, and it took 2 years to finish to get my 4-year degree at UNR. And oddly enough, going through the course of that, there's always one of those aha moments when you have one of those classes that, this really piques my interest, and that was urban design. And when I was going through that class, I'm like, this intrigues me. I wonder if someday I'll do that. Well, we'll talk about that later and how that came to pass. But I'm very grateful. I had my degree. I worked in interior design, I worked for a firm and then had my own firm for 30 years. And I had clients all around the lake and did the cabins on steroids, all of them.
And somewhere in there, didn't you run for supervisor?
Yes, I did. And so at one point in time, Charlie used to always tease me because it was the world according to Karen, And so, but, I'm a visionary. And so it's, you see the possibilities and, what can be. And so I'll never forget, I had a friend who encouraged me to run for supervisor. And Mayor Bob wasn't mayor then. And he and Susan over to the house for breakfast. And Bob and I talked, and he said, I'll do it if you'll do it. And so I did. And, wide-eyed and innocent, it's like having your first kid, you don't know what you're in for. But I'm grateful I did. And I ran against 4 other gentlemen during that time, and I have a very good friend who said, when we had our debates and that sort of thing, he goes, you were the bright light on that stage, which gave me confidence to think that, okay, maybe I'm not too far out there, and I think I can make a difference. And so, yes, I did. I served from 2011 until December 2018.
And then Bob was
mayor.
elected during that time too.
Yes, he was. So he and I started at the same time, pretty much. And so I'm very grateful for, there's so many things that, that I'll share with you about that time, but it was a great time of change for the community.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we knew part of this was during the recession. There were, businesses were struggling, all the rest of it. And we also knew that downtown was just kind of floundering. And so I used to meet with the city manager every other week, before a board meeting and discuss things. And at that time, Larry Warner was the city manager. And I said, Larry, there's got to be something that we can do to kind of jumpstart getting this community forward. And Larry thought about it in a minute, and he goes, well, actually, there is. There's an eighth of a cent that you could try and forward that that could help prompt some of these things. So many meetings, and the first person, Supervisor Brad Gronkowski, who also became a very good friend.
Right.
He was the first one that I told that was possible. And I said, Brad, I think we can do this. And I talked to Bob about it, and I knew, and I took a lot of bullets for it because, change, communities don't like change.
Right.
They're used to things being as they were, and, there were all these innuendos about, oh, you were going to make it like the Bay Area and blah, blah, blah. No.
California.
Yes, exactly.
California.
Yeah. And so, but that wasn't the vision at all. And during the course of this, Charlie and I had taken a trip with his cousin Jerry to Barcelona. And walking on the promenades and the Ramblas there, I saw, young and old walking arm in arm on the squares. And I'm like, that's my vision. That's the vision for Carson City. And so we worked forward on it. And, there was a lot of blowback. And you live there. And there was a special moment, and I call it my John McKenna moment because he was serving as a supervisor then. And both John and I served on the Water Sub-Conservancy. And so we had a meeting that particular night at the Legislative Building, and I said, and it was the night before the vote. And the vote requires a supermajority, 4 out of 5. So I said, John, can I talk to you? Because I didn't know where he was going to go on this. And he said, sure. So after the meeting was over, we sat down and I said, John, do you understand that we will have certain protections and watchdog committees in place to make sure this money gets spent where it's supposed to go? Because this money to be raised would build the MAC, the Multipurpose Athletic Center, which we talked about forever, the animal shelter, which we talked about forever. It would upgrade the wastewater treatment plant for Carson City's ultimate total build out of $80,000. And it would provide redevelopment monies for the complete streets and the redevelopment of downtown and all the corridors. And I said, so there will be watchdog committees put in place to make sure these monies are spent. And I said, I would like to appoint Andy Engelman to head up the Public Works Committee. Because, there's always worry that the money's just going to get funneled into
Right.
other pockets and not end up where it's going to go. And I said, John, both of us come from a Catholic school background. And I said, this isn't about us, this transcends us. And I knew John's base was not supporting this. And so I left it at that. And that's after a sleepless night, and should I do this? Should I? And so the next morning, I'm up at the podium, and John walks by getting to take his seat, And all he says is, damn that Catholic school education. And then we had the vote, and the rest is history. So that was a huge, huge boon for our community. And it was about sustainability into the future and bringing younger people into our community, which is part of that sustainability. And you can see that. You can see the strollers on the square. You can see them downtown. We just had the Christmas tree lighting. You know, it's just wonderful. It's wonderful, the vibrancy it's brought back to the community.
Well, part of that too was getting that awful thing out of the middle of the street.
Exactly. And, you know, and that was all part of that. And, you know, we went through all sorts of design things back to that urban development and urban design. We had so many charrettes and worked forward with Danny Rotter, who then was heading up this part of the redevelopment, and the designs and what would work and what would be most advantageous for our community. And then also launched a redevelopment facade program, so it would incentivize the owners downtown. There would be match money so that they could upgrade their facades. And so, you know, it allowed for a lot to happen. Plus, the infrastructure in the street, you remember the floods.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, Mike from Hannafin's gave us all an award that he actually mounted. They were the pipes from under the street that were literally flaking apart. So that's how badly it was needed. And so I'm glad that it happened. And that's where
So did the greenhouse project get started while you were supervisor?
It actually got started before I was supervisor. So I used to mentor kids for St. Teresa's Church, teenagers. And so I did one of the classes that I did, I wanted the kids to reenact a particularly difficult time in their lives. And one girl, and pardon me if I tear up because I always do, she reenacted that her dad was incarcerated, her mom got deported, she hid with her little brother because there was an ice raid on their trailer development. And she stole formula from Walmart and went hungry. And that hit hard. And so when Charlie got home from work that night, I said, you know, kids aren't going to ask. And I said, we've got to change this. This just can't be. So, as it would happen, Jeanette Bloom was retiring from the Supreme Court. She's an attorney. And she happened to be in the restaurant that afternoon. And I happened to be there working lunch and helping out. And she said, and I was talking to her about this, and she said, you know what, I'll help you with this. So we formed the nonprofit, and, you know, with the mission of growing, giving, and teaching for a healthier, greener, sustainable community. And we got bounced around to a few locations, and finally Richard Stokes, who was then the superintendent of schools, said to me, what would it take to do this at the high school? And I said, what it would take is that whatever lease monies you're going to charge us, that money goes into a fund for FFA, Future Farmers of America, and the ag program at Carson High School. And so you have it. And so with just a community development block grant from the city, that's all, which funded a ground source heat pump, and another gal on our board, Jenny Scanlon, who got us a grant for all the outdoor grounds. The rest was all donations and fundraising. And hence we have our 2,200 square foot greenhouse at the high school.
So a lot of that fundraising was the concerts that you did every year?
Yes. Concerts every year. We did the Concert Under the Stars, which we had started at Adele's way back when, and then it went to benefit that. And then the last one, we moved out to the golf course because it got so big, and then COVID hit. And after that, the cost of doing that was astronomical. So now it's the Grateful Harvest Dinner, and that's our big fundraiser of the year, which helps keep going what we do. Because, you know, the food we grow goes to the food insecure in the community through the agencies like Ron Wood and Fish and Circles, Meals on Wheels, all of that. And then there's an ag program at Carson High School because we're there, 200 kids in a waiting list. And, the flower baskets, which are a wonderful sponsor for, that go down the center of town, we raise those too. So it's a multifaceted project, and we're even expanding now. And, all that we do is part of the curriculum for the agriculture classes. And because the plant science and all of that at Carson High School, and actually one of the instructors now came full circle, was part of that agriculture program, got our greenhouse project scholarship, and is now an instructor at Carson High School.
Oh, wow.
In that program. So that's pretty cool.
That is.
And we are, part of our sustainability mode, we have a native plant nursery, and Rotary helped fund a vermicomposter for us, worm composting. So the worm compost we sell. That's part of a return on investment for us. And the native plants that we grow, we're getting some contracts from like BurningMan.org for Fly Ranch for native plants, and also from the Master Gardeners from Lake Tahoe and Douglas County and places like that with regards to native plants and growing, because there's a need for that. And David Ruff at Greenhouse Garden Center has been a wonderful advisor in all this, and he said this is what you guys should do, because the resource for getting this isn't here. So we keep growing. And
so you not only have the place at the high school, but also at the hospital.
At the hospital. And right now we are working together on, that's more of a wellness garden, but the food grown there too is donated. And we'll be starting some conversation after the first of the year. I just had my board meeting and we talked about all of this, because they have a mental health program for kids, and what better way to help kids, and I know because I've seen it at our greenhouse, than to connect with the earth. And so we're talking about expanding that program to make that happen. And there's a trail all around there that,
right,
leadership has helped, and we got the Bee Hotel in there, and so we're working forward to expand that wellness opportunity at that site. So,
and somewhere in there, weren't you involved with a sexual response team?
And that for me is, and I'll back up. My sister was a victim of domestic violence. She lost her life to that. So,
Ooh.
That being said, when I was asked to be on the sexual assault response team, I said, absolutely, I'd love to do this. So, was very, went to the meetings, and you know how when you're sitting in a room and all of a sudden you realize the reason nothing is going anywhere is because the person in charge is not allowing this to happen? Well, that was an aha moment for me. So, to me, it was unconscionable that women, after suffering a domestic violence incident, would have to travel to Reno for an exam. And I mean, we're talking people from Lyon County, from Douglas County, and Reno was the only opportunity. Ridiculous. And we're the capital city? No. So I decided to go around, and fortunately, Jason Woodbury was our DA at the time, and Adriana Freilich was the assistant DA, and I talked to them about this. And Nick Morano was our city manager, and I talked to Nick, and he was appalled that this was the case. Nikki Aker was in charge of Health and Human Services, and Kitty McKay is still at Carson Tahoe, and so engaged all of them. We did a tour of the Reno facility, came back, many meetings, talked through it, decided that this was something that we could forward, and it exists today. So I'm really grateful that we were able to make that happen.
You're just like amazing.
No, I just, again, solutions, possibilities, that's the thing.
And I understand you were a church youth monitor for like 18
18 years.
years?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and that was great. When your life experiences can inform other, to inform kids, I think it helps open their eyes. And I became kind of a security blanket for them when they'd have awkward moments and incidences and things. It was somebody they could come to and confide in, because you don't always confide in your parents.
Right.
So, I was grateful for that opportunity. Really grateful.
And then I understand you were involved with the Arts and Culture Commission.
Oh yeah. And that was I was on the beginning of the Arts and Culture Commission, and so you don't necessarily know how to do things and how to accomplish them. You just know that something needs to be done. And of course, with all things government, it's all about all the rules and outlining all the whats and wherefores and everything. So, we worked forward. We toured Reno, of course, and their art scene, and knew that we wanted, a vibrant arts community. And we had had so many cultural scenarios going on within our community. Stephanie Aragati and the Western Nevada Community Theater, Wild Horse Theater, the arts program at the BAC, all of that. But nothing was connected. And it felt like, there needed to be some sort of connection. And of course, all in and around that same time, I ran for supervisor too. And that's the one advantage about serving on all these committees. If you connect the dots, you can figure out how to get things done. And so it was great in that, we were going through this redevelopment plan and all the rest. And it was like, okay, can we incorporate the arts into this too? And so, after some fits and starts, and we did have an arts and culture director. And so we were able to move forward. It was 10 steps forward, 5 steps back, fits and starts. But now, I think the Arts and Culture Commission and where the BAC is going has just launched into a direction that's really positive for our community. So it took a while to get it all going, but it got going. So
You're a busy lady.
yeah.
So today, what kind of things are you involved in?
Well, now, of course, the Greenhouse Project still. I'm looking toward, a logical handoff at some point because, we're not here forever. And so, I'm looking forward to that. I'm also mentoring our next generation of community leaders. So that's important to me. And I've got grandkids. One who's graduating on Friday from University in Tennessee.
Oh my goodness.
And so, just trying to guide my kids and my grandkids, towards some peaceful balance and, that sort of thing. And then I like to watercolor paint and I play piano and I love to garden. And so it all keeps me busy. Plus I have a little, year and 9-month grandbaby as well, so
Oh my goodness.
all ends of the spectrum.
When you think about what you've done throughout your life, how do you hope to be remembered?
I hope to be remembered as someone who has made a difference in community, a positive difference in community. And I hope people, I literally found my voice in Nevada. So it's important to bloom where you're planted and to launch to the next level what you're passionate about, trust your gut, what you believe in, and not to be afraid to dip your toe in the water. So that, I'm hoping that I'm remembered as someone who, I hope to be remembered as a grandmother and a Nini, as they call me, and as a mom, as fun and loving and caring and wise. And so, that's kind of how I hope to be remembered.
So What do you wish that you had known in your younger years that you know? What advice would you give to a younger you?
Oh, okay. That one, I am going to refer to my notes because I find myself telling my grandsons this. One's graduating, another one's graduating in May. Trust your gut. Where you start may not be where you end up. Each step informs the next one. Be a community participant. Engage, because that's really important. And bloom where you're planted. I think that's extremely important. Find your voice. So that's the advice I'd like to share. And things that I wish I had known, you know. And some of your biggest lessons in life come from your biggest mistakes and from your hardest moments. So learn from them.
Have you done it all?
No.
And what?
As a friend of mine says, when you quit changing, you're dead. So, you know, have I done it all? No. Do I want to be a world traveler? Not necessarily. You know, Charlie and I took some wonderful, wonderful trips. We were privileged to go to Lebanon and Turkey and, you know, France and Italy and, you know, Alaska and Hawaii and, you know, all over the United States. So, you know, it's more about trying to accomplish and keep forwarding vision. So have I done it all? No. And as I mentioned, you know, trying to mentor our community, our next generation of community leaders is kind of the thought process going forward.
So are you involved in that thing through the city? What do I want to say? They have like a program every year for Leadership.
That's through the chamber.
That's through the chamber.
That's through the chamber. No, I am not. But I have other young members of this community reaching out. And, it's kind of gratifying. You think to yourself, well, at 74 years old, seriously? But they are honestly seeking advice on how to move forward. So it's like, all right, I guess I still have value to this community. Plus, I love the community. You know, people have said to me since Charlie has passed, are you going to stay here? Are you going to move to Tennessee? Because that's where my daughter is now, or our son is in Arizona. And I said, no, this is home. This is home. Yeah.
So have I not asked you everything? Is there something that you'd like to...
You know, the one thing I would like to say is I'd like to give a shout out to some of the men in my life, some of whom are not with us anymore, but who weren't afraid to support a woman that had a vision. And that would be, of course, my husband, Charlie, but former mayors Jim Robertson and Bob Kroll, and Supervisor Brad Bonkowski, Don Carlson, Steve Hartman, and still with us, John McKenna, and Nick Morano, and Gary Ailes. And then friends and Nevada women of history in their own right, Laura Fitzsimmons and Maggie Tracy, and Stephanie Tyler, and Carol Ancona. And then Kippy and Jeremy Spilker, who in their photography commit to memory all of the wonderful things that have gone on in my life anyway. So no, this is the 2020 Nevada Farm Conference Award for supporting local farmers. And for Charlie and I brought this because it was one of the most wonderful awards we've ever received. Because
this is for the restaurant.
This is for the restaurant, but also because I had gotten the greenhouse project going, and my husband had supported that as well. We are supporting educating tomorrow's farmers. It's about sustainability and community and the importance of connecting with the earth and growing healthy food and all those sorts of things, all of things that we stood for. So
you get the shovel.
Yeah, so we got the shovel. It's a great award.
You should hold that up.
I love it.
Uh-huh.
Oh, awesome.
I know, it was. I was thrilled.
Well, that's just amazing. I really thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
having me.
sharing your life with us. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a pleasure.